I just remembered my headphones. I'll be right back. Hey! Completely forgot about these. Okay. We want good audio. Might have been me. Long time.
I know. It's lovely to connect and see you. I wish it was more in person and feel the vibes and feel the body language and share a hug and laugh. Yet I will take technology.
But we'll do it. We'll take it.
Exactly. How are you, my love?
Doing well. I'm doing really well. Yeah. How about you?
Same thing. Well, that's my answer all the time. I'm being very intentional of I notice we have been habitual of just saying good or not bad. And when people are like not bad, well, I'm like, well, how worse can it get then? Because we have to be aware of our self-talk, our language. And so I'm being intentional about well, because sometimes it's not good, yet I'm well. Yes. And that's the big important thing. Even in the aches and pains or the elation and energy, I'm always my baseline. I'm well. Yes. So I can meet you there and not, because I think sometimes our self-talk, we try to paint over things that actually need to be addressed and acknowledged. And we can, like faking the funk, you can do that, sure. Yeah, it's going to catch up with you eventually. And I know that. That's for, so it's like the word, empower yourself with words, yet also don't dishonor what you're actually feeling internally, what your emotions are in a world that doesn't want emotions or context. And it's like, well, we're actually seeing how harmful that is and how detrimental it is for the human spirit. Emotions need to be in our communication, our conversations, and also with ourselves.
No pun intended, but well said.
Yeah.
And it's been a practice for me just in general it's funny, really intentionally the last few weeks, just being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And what it means to just really be seen. So that's been a recurring theme actually for me. So even what you're talking about right now, I love where you went with it. Because I am very intentional. I believe words are very powerful, like you said, what we speak over our lives, over our children, And so I love what you said there, that when you say you're well, that's well, that could be well. I woke up this morning. Well, all is well. I know my child left the door this morning and I actually, it's funny. The words I used to chase to this morning were be well, eat well. I made him a really nice lunch. You know what I mean? Eat well, be well were the last words I said to Chase before he walked out the door. Interesting enough. And I feel like there could be still stuff happening, but you can still live well. You can still find the joyful moments. You can still find those little moments in life in between whatever's happening in the world, whatever might be going on in your own personal life. So I love where you went there.
As you said, the vulnerability. If we haven't been taught really how to relate with our own emotions, it's very difficult to really be there for somebody else and witness it for them and let it be messy within, boundaries of it not being violent, physically and also verbally and psychologically. We have to be aware of that because everybody's responsible for their own processing of, excuse my terminology, shit, because we all process shit in different ways. And for me, I use that term because if you garden, we all know you need manure to get the nutrients, to get the vitality, to get the vibrance. And yet a lot of people don't want to be in that process. And just give me the fruits. And it's like, well, there's some shit you got to process.
Right.
You got to cultivate.
Everything happens underneath the ground in the dark, by the way. So we gotta go through the dark process for things to, as you said, for us to enjoy the fruits.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. What keeps coming up for me is authenticity. So the more you can be relatable, honest about where you are, there's more authenticity that allows for more connection and deeper.
Welcome to the Lift Oneself podcast, Dionne. I'm thankful you're here with me.
Oh, it's great to be here for many reasons. We have known each other since our children were babies.
Yeah.
I know you as Nat Nat.
Yeah.
And my son is now 16, and for us to reconnect in this way is very special and meaningful to me. So thank you for having me.
Let's take a breath together. Breathe in through your nose. Hold it. Gently release. Dropping into the moment. And I don't know if you can hear, but I hear the birds in your background. I think that is important when we meet each other, is in those transitions of taking a breath together, so we can really drop into the moment. I want to ask you, how is your heart doing?
My heart, I was just sharing with you earlier, I've been on quite a spiritual journey. So with regards to my faith, I have been really going in, and asking those questions that will allow my heart to be opened up more than ever before. Really allowing. So for me, my Heavenly Father or my Creator is God, and every morning I actually ask Him to search my heart and give Him permission wherever there may be brokenness to go in, wherever there may be darkness to penetrate it with His light, to show me new ways to be intimate with Him. I would say for this last year and a half, I've actually really been doing a lot of inner healing work more than ever before. I just feel like so much healing has taken place that my heart feels lighter and more open and more vulnerable than ever. We were just talking about that earlier, where I've been really allowing myself to be more vulnerable and more seen than I ever have before. That's how my heart's doing. It's been healing.
Beautiful. What can you thank COVID for?
For me, it was the opportunity to shed things that I believe were not in alignment with where I was going next in terms of the next chapter of my life. And at the same time, it really allowed me to fully step into my purpose. So what I truly believe I am called to do on this planet, which is to support women, especially mothers, in living a life of limitless possibility, passion, and purpose, and finding healthy ways to balance it all. They still want more, and supporting them in believing that they can actually have whatever they desire.
What is your definition of intimacy?
Wow, it's changed a lot based on the work that I've been doing lately. Initially when I used to think intimacy, for me, the automatic kind of go-to was it being in a relationship with a partner, whether that's sexually, but that's what came to mind first. It was the man and the woman together, or the partners coming together. But now I'm realizing that it's so much broader than that. It could be, as you were chatting about earlier, it could be literally an intimate moment with a stranger. But it's a moment of, I believe, there's exposure, there is deeper connection, there's an authenticity that, I guess, the authenticity and the vulnerability is what allows for this deeper connection between two people.
Mention that you've done spiritual work and inner work. How has the intimacy with yourself been?
Yeah, it's been, especially as you mentioned during COVID, just having this. I've been doing a lot more quiet time. So a lot more, I think it's Mother Teresa who said it, solitude, silence, and stillness, right, are the friends of God. And I've been doing a lot more of that So having a lot more time to spend with myself and do a lot more introspection, a lot more journaling. It's been quite freeing. I've been looking at parts of me that I've never really taken time to really look at before, literally. I just completed a womb wellness program.
Nice.
I mean, that's a sacred part of our bodies that we don't take a lot of time and spend a lot of time with, and really had a chance to go to some places that I didn't even realize might have still been harboring in my womb, and actually taking a look at her. When last have you taken a look at your womb space?
Yeah.
I'm going pretty deep with you here, but that's how intimate I have been getting with myself.
Mm-hmm. For me, I think we've been too much in the definition of intimacy being pointed outwardly, and never had the consideration that to be intimate with another is you have to be intimate with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us have been seeking it outwardly, not understanding why we're banging into things, being hurt, blaming the other, all these things, yet not realizing the wrestling you're doing is with yourself, because there's parts in you that are trying to get your attention, to show certain parts that you don't want to feel. Because a lot of us have been taught or shown that emotions aren't allowed. And unless you get in connection with those emotions, you don't understand the intimacy of things. And you bypass or suppress a lot of things that actually require those moments of stillness and solitude to really feel the totality of it all. Not just what you want to label it, to go beyond what the definitions are and see the full context of it all. And to have tenderness and gentleness with yourself. And when those big waves come up, it's warrior work to do that stuff.
I love that word, warrior work, because it is ongoing. It is an ongoing battle, if you will. But we also know, right? How do you create a warrior? It's not in a white room with pillows and white feathers, right? We're going to have to go in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go through some stuff, as you said.
And I think that's where people get the wrong concept of why we create a setting that is gentle and soft, because we understand what's going to come up. And we need the reminder of staying with that gentleness, even when the wars are coming up within and the conflicts. So it's,
sorry, go ahead.
It's just, sometimes people get the misconception of what inner work is, and it's not unicorn shitting rainbows all the time. It really isn't always blissful. It's part of my language for some, yet it's processing shit. And when we're going through that, we also have to remember to have a tenderness when the harshness comes up and when the heart wants to close because that vulnerability feels too threatening and our defense mechanisms come up. We need that reminder of tenderness and that you have the ability to feel your way through this.
Most importantly, to be able to be with it is the key. Yeah. And there's no right or wrong. We're given emotions for a reason, right? We just want to make sure they're not controlling us, but understanding that they're indicators. They're there to serve us,
Yeah. They're data, they're information.
Yes.
They're not direction. That comes from Susan David. Yet a lot of time we go with the impulse or the feeling, and it's taking a pause for a minute and being with that overwhelming energy that comes up inside us.
Totally.
Big emotions.
Funny enough, my husband, he actually, we've been having a very deep conversation around this, because he gets very easily derailed. If he's running late, everything and everybody around him is impacted by that. Him just getting very frustrated and what have you. And I told him, I said, the power is in the pause. So I love what you just said there. The moment you can disrupt it, right? And not just knee-jerk react, right? Going back to the survival mechanism that you mentioned, the automatic, and taking a moment to pause. So much can take place in those 30 seconds where you can then take your power back and choose in that moment,
As you mentioned, we have known each other for a very long time. And
Mhm.
actually, I had the memory because you're speaking about the womb, and I really appreciate the work that I'm doing because I was reflecting on a memory this morning in my walk, preparing for our conversation. And I remember Chase being in your belly, us coming up. I don't know if it was a Easter weekend or a Thanksgiving weekend. We used to always come up to New York, and you guys housed us. And I remember you being pregnant with Chase, frying plantains, sitting on a chair, talking to your mom
That sounds about right.
and greeting us. And now seeing this, us all excited and yeah, yeah. Yet also it's like, wait, taking into context, like you being pregnant. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to have people around me right now. Like I'm going through some stuff and I'm not, yeah, you guys are all, yay, let's, go shopping, go to whatever parties and stuff. And you're in a different energy mode of nesting and, you know, harboring a new life. And so
Mhm.
seeing that, it was like, wait, I know we all gave hugs and everything else. Yeah, for me, I'm like, I hope I paused enough to see you, to see that and acknowledge it. Because sometimes we will forget those moments. And because we're all elated in our stuff, we're forgetting, oh, you remember how that is? And let's not ignore it. And yeah, it was nice to be able to see that and just reflect on myself and just here to let me show you that I saw you and I acknowledge it. And especially hindsight is 2020. I really see you and I honor you. It was a lot for you to navigate through. And you just mentioned about, being in the womb. Many may not realize that when Chase was born, there were some medical challenges you had to go through as a parent to witness and experience. Would you mind opening that up for others that may be experiencing or may go into that and share how that was going through that and what supports you used? And possibly also now the knowledge that you have, what supports would have been useful that you didn't know about?
Yeah. So um, I believe I was around, it was very early on. I would say no more than 5 months pregnant. I'm trying to think when it was actually, it had to be much earlier, but I was going in for what would be a normal ultrasound. But yeah, went in for what I thought was a normal, regular ultrasound. It was my first. I have always been very healthy, never had any issues, growing up. So I'm thinking I'm just going to get okay, everything looks good. And just from the doctor's response, she said, I'm going to refer you to someone over at Weill Cornell. I said, okay. So then I went for a second ultrasound with this other doctor now. And I remember her sitting me down afterwards and Chase's father, Sean, at the time, he had just become an entrepreneur. He was also traveling a lot and he couldn't be there for this ultrasound. So already I was nervous. I am already feeling, just alone in what I feel is a really important time that I really wish I had his support there with me. Um, because when I got this news, I was just so shattered, so, rattled by it that uh, I believe it was like at 3 months, they could see that there was something irregular with my son's heart. So it was about 3 months. They can see this. And I remember this woman, very slight woman, stark white hair, very gentle. And she said that I actually had a choice because based on what they're seeing, it could mean other things. And I was also given the opportunity to terminate because it could mean other things. So yeah, it was just such an emotional time. I broke down and I felt so alone. Like I said, I really wished his father at least was there to be there for me. But I remember her, I felt very held by her. She was, like I said, very kind and she said, I'm going to refer you to my friend over at New York Presbyterian. But at the same time, I believe in that moment I decided to keep my son. I don't believe I wavered on that. So I think that's why I got the recommendation now to meet with her colleague, her friend. But she used the word friend. And I mean, at this point, they tell you that the baby's heart, just if they were to close their fist, that's the size of their heart. So think about in utero at 3 months how big my son's heart is, and they can see that. She had recommended me to a man who was the one of the top cardiologists in the world. That's her friend. And he basically told us, this is after several ultrasounds and meetings with him, that Chase had a very rare heart condition, rare heart anomaly. They call it a double right outlet ventricle. And he also had multiple VSDs, ventricular septum defects, which are holes in the heart. And there was a narrowing of the left pulmonary artery. So he had a lot happening. So it's almost like one chamber was doing all the work. So we knew this from 3 months in utero. So many meetings to decide whether or not, what kind of surgery they were going to perform. Just being constantly reminded about what the negative outcomes can be is so nerve-wracking. But at the same time, Dr. Kleiman is his name. He's no longer with us. He had a way about him. He was such a human. There was never, it felt like he was the doctor and he really made sure we understood. He spoke to us, not over us. He allowed, it's interesting. For those appointments, Sean was always there with me, I will say, going through the actual process itself. Sean was more proactive. He was the one really going in around the questions. I was more absorbing. So the roles those were the roles during that whole process. I will say, by the time we decided what we were going to do, we felt very good about it based on all the way they really made sure we were held throughout the process, informed throughout the process, that by the time Chase was born, it was actually for me, I look back, it was a miracle, honestly, because they expected that as soon as Chase was born, they would have to operate immediately. When I went in, it was a scheduled C-section. Was hoping to be able to have a natural, but my amniotic fluid was also low. He could not handle the contractions. And I remember that day where my situation wasn't as urgent as some of the other emergency C-sections. So they kept delaying. So Chase was supposed to be born in November, by the way. Kept waiting. I'm like fading. I'm getting this intravenous. I enjoy my food. Although Sean and I did go and have a nice meal before we went in, but eventually he had to step up and get a little, like, what's happening? We need to get my son and the mother of my child taken care of. So he had to kind of get vocal with them. And I'm happy to say everything went smoothly with the actual C-section. And I remember Chase crying. And I just remember saying, he's so big. He's so big. That's all I remember, and then I barely got to hold him. And they whisked him away because they thought they were going to have to immediately operate on him. And next thing they tell me, actually, he's actually doing quite well. So we're just going to monitor him. I remember him being in the ICU in his incubator, and we're watching. And somehow his heart is compensating for itself. They didn't expect this. So eventually he came home. No surgery. Think about that. It was amazing. So there was a point, though, I will say, where I was they don't keep you in the hospital very long, as you know now. I think it's 2 or 3 days and you go home. So I went home and Chase was still in the ICU. Now I'm still trying to breastfeed, all that good stuff. I'm pumping at this point, and we live in Brooklyn. The hospital's located past Harlem. So I'm now traveling back and forth daily from Brooklyn to Harlem. I don't know where we find our strength as mothers. It's amazing to me when I look back. But I'm pumping and traveling back and forth on the train to bring milk to my son. And at some point, they said, no, we're watching a healthy baby. And Chase came home, no surgeries. Chase, we had to go through a lot of procedures, but Chase didn't actually have his surgery until he was going into kindergarten. He was 5 years old, 5 years later. I tell you, when I think back, it was an emotional roller coaster as we went through several of the procedures, because there were times they had to put actual, catheters through his side, had to do other surgeries, more minor surgeries to close up holes, things like that. So we were constantly in hospitals back and forth. But what was so amazing to me, it was really Chase where I channeled my strength from, because he was so grounded. He was so calm. Like I can still picture him one day in the bed. He's about this big. He can sit up now at this point, but he's just a little thing. And he's sitting there in his little diaper and his vest. And there's constantly, they work as a team. It's like, this is actually the same hospital where Bill Clinton was operated on when he had heart surgery, David Letterman. Okay. So they work as a team. So just think about how many doctors are in the room at a time, each time. Also because he's got this very rare anomaly. So they're also studying him at the same time, which sometimes I'd feel conflicted about too, but that's another side part. And he would be so calm. You'd think most babies, they're seeing all these strangers, they're poking, Chase never cried. And I'll never forget one day that the fellow under who was now his cardiologist, since Dr. Kleiman passed away, I'll never forget her saying, there's something regal about him. Like, that's why I say I got my courage and bravery from Chase. I would say Sean had a harder time emotionally dealing with it, where if he shut down, he'd be in tears, but somehow Chase gave me the hope. The fact that he was so calm in the face of all of this, he gave me that strength to do the same. And there were times where we're giving our own son needles, blood thinners. I mean, I think about some of the things that we were actually, we had to go through to make sure our son gets through this and thrives, Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. In my heart of hearts, I believed everything was going to be okay.
While you were saying it, I'm shifting through all of the memories I have of, going through that experience with you guys long distance and being able to hold Chase when he was brought up here and be able to watch him at my place and seeing the tiny scars on his chest too when he was a baby because of all those different little procedures and stuff. And as much as we require the medical system, we also forget, or we have been led to believe, that the body doesn't know how to adapt. It doesn't know how to heal. I wonder if it's just that we limit our belief and our trust in the ability of the body, because we have this construct of definitions. Well, it looks like this, it's going to end up like this. And it's not always like that. And then we will label it as a miracle. I think we've also forgotten the ability of the body adapting and not being on our own timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, our bodies are fascinating. I literally was in a workshop this morning, believe it or not, about teeth. Like, we don't realize just how everything is so interconnected, that even your teeth metaphysically, so there's physically how it's attached to so many things in our bodies, but then metaphysically, how it's affecting us when we don't take care of our mouths. And just by doing the preventative things, whether it's our dietary, what have you, like our body can heal itself. It can. I absolutely agree with you.
You were just saying, I had to give my child blood thinners. I had to do this. And it's like, there's nothing you can prepare for that. Mm-hmm. So you're in the process of it. Yet now when we can take a breath, there can be a real overwhelming grace that washes over us in those moments where we may have been harsh, prickly, denied ourselves certain things, not been able to really feel the magnitude of it, to put things in context. Did any of those things open up in this time of spiritual awakening in inner work that you've been going through?
That's actually a really good question. I will say this. You asking me to do this interview is what had me really to go back and reflect on certain things that I hadn't thought about in a long time. And I guess what came up for me is I was the mother for this. Like, I was the mother for this. You don't know why you're going through it in the moment, but I was equipped for this. I was the mother he needed. I was the calm. I was the I guess I don't know how to explain it, but I believe that there's a lot of my spirit, my energy, which I believe was able to kind of hold or carry him through. And at the moment, I'm probably just going through the motions, right? You're doing what you have. Your mama bears in action, right? So we're in our automatic in the moment. But looking back, I feel like I was the mother that was supposed to do this for Chase. Yeah. You know, that I was actually equipped with the gifts to get him to this point. So I think that's the grace in the time. You're like, why me, God? Why me? Why am I going through this? Why can't I have a son that, you know, like everybody else that doesn't have, you know, I believe who better than.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, trust. For those that may have this situation, I would like to bring them into that you also still had a career and you were traveling. Mm-hmm. And how was that having to navigate with a child that you still have uncertainty about? Because the heart is one of the main functions that, you know, and there's all kinds of different things that can go on. Yet you still were tethered with your passion and being able to do what lit you up, and which is fashion and the colors and creativity. So how was that navigating to make the choice of being the mother and also still doing what you passionately enjoy doing and being able to travel?
Yeah, that was interesting because, as you said, there's a whole dichotomy there where I moved to New York to live out my dream, which was to work on Fifth Ave. And I was doing it. And I'm getting to travel to some of the most beautiful places in the world, like you said. At the same time, you're torn as a mother. There is the guilt of leaving your child, you know, for a week at a time, days at a time. I remember going to Europe and I never stayed. Everybody else would stay extra time and you could actually add on a personal vac. I would race home back to my son, you know, because I just wanted to get back to him. And at the same time, I have to add, his father was also traveling too. So it was stressful coordinating our schedules. And he would do something on a regular basis that would literally just drive me insane because he would book his travel overlapping mine. But I am so grateful when I tell you I had a woman, I call her my fairy godmother. She became like a third grandmother to Chase. Now, I will say, thankfully, I also had a village. I'll say I had a village in terms of my own mother, because she would come for months at a time. And when you know your mom's on it, your mind can be at ease. So I had peace when my mom would be there. And then when she wasn't there, what's nice, we lived in a brownstone and there were two apartments above. And in the upper apartment, actually, Chase's actual godparents lived up there. And then eventually their mother, so my best friend's mother, moved here from California and she was retired. And actually her nickname was the Child Whisperer. She didn't have grandchildren of her own, but she had taken care of all the nieces and nephews in their family. And she just took to me and Chase. She also knew what it was to be a single working mother. She did that with her daughter, my friend. She's actually the one that coined the phrase for me. Sometimes you just need a moment. And she would do that for me. It was strange at first. I'm living in New York now for how many years? And someone just doing something just to be nice, nothing in return. It was weird. It was hard to receive at first, but she really just wanted to support me and Chase. Whether it was just to give me an hour to go get my nails done or, but she was that extra support system for me. And it was learning to receive it. And I remember when Chase was about to start school, I'm thinking like when we grew up, they learn their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s once they go to school. I'm finding out we've got to teach them that before they get into the classroom. So now I'm scrambling. Miss Scarlett, she goes into action. I can still see her one day sitting at our kitchen table. We had changed the whole kitchen into like a classroom, trying to teach Chase how to read and count. And I can see her sitting there teaching Chase, Tom, Dick, and Jane. They're reading the book. I'll never forget one of the days I came back from an international trip, and her and Chase are outside out front of the house with a sign, "Welcome home, Mom." Like, when I tell you I'm grateful, we have to learn. I know, I remember Sean convincing me to get a cleaning lady. In my culture, West Indian people, my family's from St. Lucia. We clean our own house, I never sent my laundry out. That we don't do that, someone else doing our laundry. I mean, that came much later, but it took me a minute. But I am grateful to Sean. Once a month, we'd have a deep clean. Because all these things you're trying to juggle, right? You're trying to be everything, the perfect clean house. But I came to the realization, do I want to spend more time intentionally with my son? Or do I want to be busy cleaning the house? And it also helped me with my perfectionism too. By having Chase, it helped me let go of some stuff. Like, okay, some pillars are going to be out of place. The house is not going to be completely perfect, but do I want to spend time with my son or be worrying about the house not being perfectly clean? So yeah, allow your village to help you. I believe in support services. I did actually have to hire a nanny.
Yeah, I remember the nanny. Yeah.
Yes. And went through a few of them, but yes. So I'm able to be present at work and know that my son is well taken care of by having that team in my court. And I have to also thank a woman that I worked with. I remember my first day back to work. And I did pretty good. Chase was 4 months. Imagine in the US, you only get 3 months. I got 4 just because of our situation. So think about how tiny they are when you're going back to work. Got through the train ride. It was when I got to the lobby of my office building and the security guard said, "Hey, welcome back." And poor guy, I just started bawling. I remember showing him a couple of pictures, through the tears, and then I collected myself. I know he was just like frozen. I didn't know what to do. But I collected myself and I went upstairs, and I remember asking one of my coworkers, I said, "So with the travel, like, how do you do it?" Because she had just had kids too, and was just coming back from maternity. And she said, "You know what? You're actually going to appreciate having a day or two in a hotel room where you don't have to take care of anybody. You don't have to clean, and you can just be." And you know what? Best words of advice I ever got. So I was able to appreciate, rather than feeling the mom guilt, I actually could appreciate the little quick trips, nationally that we would take, where I had a moment, where I could have a moment just to be with myself. I didn't have to go anywhere. I wasn't like I was out partying, just enjoying. I would look forward to getting in the bed and having the room service. No cooking, no cleaning, and just watching some of adult television. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. So I am thankful that I had people along the way that encouraged me time, that time to replenish. Summer Fridays, it's going to be out now, but nobody ever knew that I had summer Fridays. Nobody in my family knew. I used to get off at 12 on Fridays. You're letting the public know now that I used to get off at noon, and that was my time. Whether I met my cousin for lunch or just went browsing, went to a movie, but that was my time. And I would come home fresh, more to give. Chase could come running and we're ready to rock for the weekend, But I would use that time.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
We forget to show up for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we forget how we can be so harsh on ourselves to have it all together, do all these different roles and these different appearances and images, and not realize like you have limited energy. I understand you want to have an abundant, yet you do have limited energy, and you have to allow yourself to receive the help.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is letting go of some of the old stories. Just because that's how your mother did it doesn't mean they were happy to do it. You know what I mean? But they did it. Do I have to struggle like they did? So I had to let that go. So it might be cultural or familial.
Yeah.
I had to let it go.
Because we repeat what we saw.
Yeah.
And as much as intellectually, to do something different, to release those energetic charges in the nervous system, that takes work. Yeah. Because it is a charge that there's a belief that's there that you can only do it this way, or you're unsafe to do it a different way. It's not an intellectual thing. So when people are like, oh, talk your way through or think your way through, and it's like, no, you got to feel your way through to discharge those charges that come up. Faith and trust are the same thing. Yet sometimes we'll say we have faith, yet we're not realizing, well, it means that you need to trust. And the trust has to come within yourself.
Yes.
And it's difficult to trust ourselves.
Yeah, it starts with trusting ourselves. You're absolutely right. Because if we're not trusting over here, how can we trust out there? Yeah.
And we're looking for those places or people that would fill the hole, the void, and not realizing, well, the hole and void is because you're not trusting yourself. Mm-hmm. And not just trusting yourself to make the good decisions. It's trusting yourself that when the losses come, you won't disconnect from yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing I'm going to add is the comparison. That'll drain you. You want to talk about an energy drain?
That's a cultural thing too, because we've always been in competition and comparison. Well, don't you see how they do it? And don't you see how this? And don't you see? And it's like, how about I do it my way?
Exactly. Because that means I'm a bad mom if I'm not doing it that way. It's draining. So once you can also begin to recognize that and let that go, that there's no one way, just like there's no child's the same. There's no cookie cutter way of mothering. So just do what's right for you and your child.
Yeah. And also be open to see where you may be harsh with yourself.
Yeah.
And like you said, my summer Fridays, I had to fill myself up to be the person that was needed in my roles.
Well said.
Not just fake the funk and be like, oh yeah, I have it all together. And it's like, no, you actually have to be playful with yourself. And that's when I ask the adults around me, I'm like, oh, what do you do for play? They're like, play? What are you talking about? I'm like, play. They're like, what? They're like, actually, yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's why it's so heavy and serious and there's no intimacy, there's no lightness, is because you're forgetting to play. And sometimes it's not just naturally that comes. You have to put that into your schedule to remind yourself.
Absolutely.
It's a part of your responsibility.
Absolutely. Luckily, with the summer Fridays, there was already a structure there in place. But if I didn't have that, yes, I've got to be intentional to create that, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, but you've got to do it. You'll have more to give. As they say, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You got to refill yourself. And it's funny, I'm actually reading Brené Brown's book right now, Dare to Lead. And I can't remember the author's name, but they literally just talked about how important sleep and play. There's a book literally that just focuses on the importance of those two things for a more fulfilled and purposed, life, driven life, when the satisfaction is exactly what you just said. Play is essential.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's what it involves: curiosity, it's freedom, it's all the things that we need to really have a life that's full.
Yeah.
And bring that to others, our children and what have you. They need to see that. If they're always seeing mom and dad stressed and hard, they're going to think that's what life has to be, stressed and hard. And we know that's not true.
Yeah. And I really want to circle back to how you said the apprehension. I'm in New York and somebody was just offering something out of the goodness of their heart and wanted to be there to champion me and serve me. No strings attached. That doesn't happen.
That's a foreign thing. Isn't that sad? Isn't that a sad thing? It felt so foreign. I had to question it for a while.
Yeah.
Before I had to really just, as you said, trust it and sit in it and just allow. And that comes back to worthiness as well, right? Recognizing your worth, that I am worthy of, which has been another big practice for me lately too, is believing I am worthy of receiving. We're amazing. We're natural caregivers as women, as mothers, to pour out. So learning to actually believe you're worthy of receiving is, another form of intimacy. And another prompt and you had asked about tools, another prompt that I've been using lately, because yes, here the message is superwoman, super mom, you can just see the cape flying. But something I've been working on is asking, again, my creator, show me, or actually I should say, sever my dependence on my independence. Show me new ways to be dependent on you. I've been really practicing surrendering, because when you surrender, that's not quitting, but that's just releasing this false control, right? Because it's false. We cannot control everything. And it's when you can actually allow for divine intervention and possibility. It's usually so much better than whatever we're trying to do in our own strength all the time, And I've seen it where I've surrendered, whether it's around, Chase as he's growing up now, he's 16. You got to surrender a little bit, right? And it's beautiful to see how he's coming to his own, making decisions and, because I'm not trying to do it all for him. So things like that, surrendering, allowing someone to just help you with your child and believe they're going to be okay. It's good for me to receive and go take a walk. Surrender. Yeah.
For me, I see it as there's dependency. When we come in here, we need to be dependent for our needs from our parent. And then we're taught about an independence of learning to supply our own needs. Yet it's also to move into the interdependent, that we don't have to do this alone. And that's where we learn to trust that God is within it all. Like it starts within us, yet we're interconnected and interdependent on each other. We're not supposed to human alone. And we can get very apprehensive with it. When I can see that interdependence, it's like, I know that God is in this and this, and I have to have the ability to trust and follow the guidance. And a lot of times it's just simplicity, and we question the simplicity. It can't be this simple. It couldn't have been here all along, and I just been walking past it. And it's like, because sometimes we forget to look at the interdependence.
Yes. And a lot of times it's all within us. If we just take the time. Right. And that's why we got to take that time to get quiet and get still, because we're missing the downloads. We're missing the signs and wonders, and it's might be right there in front of us. And as you said, a lot of times and he is simple. If it's complicated then it's probably not, that's your indicator.
Complex is different than complicated. And I don't think people understand that word.
Yeah. It tends to be simple. Mm-hmm. So nice. I mean, simple is easy though, but it's,
mm-hmm. Simple. Oh, go take a breath when you're frustrated. It's simple just to breathe. Yet, when you're all frustrated, don't tell me to breathe. Don't tell me that shit. I don't need to breathe. You go breathe. And it's like,
exactly.
Just take a breath for a minute.
It's like already going. How do you think about trying to stop that moving train that's going at 100 miles an hour, right? Because you're ready to go. You're trying to tell me to breathe?
Yet it's a simple thing. And it's not easy though. And that's where we have to understand our own practices, have the ability to be intimate with ourselves and be able to talk to ourselves, because we're the ones that have to talk ourselves off the ledge.
Yes.
Be honest with yourself.
Yes.
And that's not easy. You had mentioned reset for women.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the birds in your background. Oh, just listening to them.
A little sanctuary in the middle of Brooklyn. Honestly, I'm literally looking at grapes. There's grapes outside my window.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you had mentioned reset for women and how you wanted to amplify the message for women to empower them.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is really inspired by my personal story. I had been 20 years into my fashion career. I had just turned 40. I should have been, at the time of my life, I'd actually been recruited to, you might have heard of Kleinfeld, New York, Say Yes to the Dress. They had opened their first outpost in the world outside of New York, in Toronto. So I was back home. They'd opened up a 20,000 square foot luxury flagship, and I was part of the launch team. I mean, no retail background, no bridal background, but I had built relationships over time. So I was handpicked to be a part of this team. I still got to travel back to New York. I even got to be on the show. The designers from all over the world are coming. I mean, I should have been in my glory, but I felt there was more I was supposed to do. And I thought I was going to go back to school and become a kindergarten school teacher. That's what I thought. I remember that age where Chase was a sponge. I gave you the scene with me and Mrs. Scarlett, right? So, but at the same time, very shortly after I was in this tug of war, right, with my heart, Chase's father reaches out and says, Dionne, I want to launch a financial literacy youth program. Will you help me? And we ended up launching. I went for it, believe it or not, with some deep thought. But it has given us the opportunity to rewrite our story, create a new legacy and put some good into the world. And our son, sees us, even though we're not together, working together, right? Because he would come to the classes with us at times. And he actually expressed his gratitude in an essay, which brought me to tears. And that's why I knew I had done the right thing. And so a lot of times when they say, trust your intuition, it may not look right, but it feels right. Go for it. So much forgiveness took place. So much good came out of that. Yes. And that's what set me on my path to actually seeking my purpose, because I still felt there was something gnawing at me. Although we did launch that program, we've touched thousands of young people with our financial literacy program called Financially Clean. A 5-star rated podcast was born, 2 Black guys with good credit. Did that for 5 years, the co-host, as the lady with the facts. So now we're reaching the world with our message, and we get signed to a network. I should be happy, right? I should be, opportunities are coming in, but I still felt there was more. And it was through a podcast episode. It was my husband at the time having a coach. And I was like, ooh, I'm liking this, that it led me on my path to actually becoming a professional coach. And my company is called Live Your Best Life for You. And so I say all that to say that I believe that anyone at any age, at any stage, can reset their life. I was 40 years old after a 20-year singular career in fashion and a single mom. And I was able to now reset my life where I'm living out my purpose. And there's all the reasons why we don't. We say time, we say money, all the things that get in the way, real or imagined. And that's what inspired that 5-step process or program that I created, the reset, how to pivot from powerless to purpose. That's where that came from. Again, the fruits of the pandemic.
There are other places I would like to go to, yet I'm mindful of time. Maybe possibly you'll come for part 2 for the podcast.
Love to, sure.
Because where I would like to go to, yet I won't go into today, are the wounds of your father and how the reparation of that, and seeing how pain had an influence on how you related to yourself, and then going through that forgiveness and opening your heart, because that was a big thing to open up a lot of.
Absolutely. The one thing I'll say there, though, because I know we are short on time, but I will say, because I said yes to that podcast, no, I should say this, because I said yes to Financially Clean, which people probably thought I was crazy. And then because I said yes to the podcast, okay, it then took us back to our hometown of Ottawa, Ontario, where we started teaching our Financially Clean program monthly in Ottawa, Ontario, at Sean's alma mater, actually, Ottawa University, where I ended up rekindling my relationship with my father. And when we launched the program there, we actually did an opener with a live podcast episode with students in their auditorium. And I'll never forget that day, because my father and my mother, I haven't had my mother and father sitting in the front row to watch me perform since I was a kid. Now I'm 40 something years old, because I forgave, because I said yes. I have my mother and father sitting there cheering me on front row as an adult. That's what's available. That's what's possible when you forgive, when you trust. And I guess we'll leave the rest for part 2. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you for that. Where can the listeners find you?
Oh, yes. So liveyourbestlife4you.com, all spelled out, is my website. You can also find me on social media at Dionne Nicholls, Dionne Nicholls, Nicholls. And I'd love for you to hit my YouTube, so the channel's Live Your Best Life for You. And then just plug in Dionne Nicholls and you'll find me. I also have a show called What Gives You Life that I launched during the pandemic that you might enjoy as well.
I'm going to bring you just into one reflective question. I'm going to ask you to go back to your 18-year-old self.
Okay.
And bring this awareness there to that 18-year-old. And you're only able to say 3 words, only 3 words. What would those 3 words be to that 18-year-old self?
You are good enough.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for having such an intimate, open conversation with me, Dionne. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I've been watching you and being so inspired by your journey and how you bring us in so intimately. So this format and how you've, decided to take the direction of your podcast, it's just a beautiful reflection of who you are and who you're being in the world. And thank you for letting me be a part of it.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate you. Remember, be kind and soft with yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you for making it all the way to the end. I appreciate you and your time. If you found anything that was relevant, or perhaps there's somebody that you think can benefit from this podcast, please share it out. Help grow the community. Help grow Lift Oneself. You can find more information on our website at www.liftoneself.com. Until next time, be sure to be kind and soft with yourself. You matter.